Well, this is a view in downtown Cairo. The Nile River, or part of it, is shown on the left, and the blue arrow points to our hotel, and the star points to the Palace of Arts, which is part of the Cairo Opera House complex. While I was there was this excellent exhibition of contemporary art, and I'm going to show you my photographs of a lot of the works. The only problem is that I don't know hardly anything about the show, the artworks, or the artists, because all the wall tags look like this, and I can't read Arabic. Unbelievably, I couldn't find anything online later about the exhibit, except that it was called the 61st Cairo Salon. I did several searches, including a search on the Salon du Caire, which means Salon of Cairo, and found that it refers to an annual art exhibition which was held in Cairo from the 1920s to the 1940s, and it showcased both Egyptian and European modern art. It was Egypt's equivalent to the Paris Salon. But without information about this particular show, we have to just view the artworks for themselves, sort of at face value. There's a lot of variety and quite a range of styles, and you will see a lot of Western influence, but also several references to ancient art and also to Islam. So these first two slides are interesting surreal abstracts, I'm sure by the same artist. And this is an interesting sculpture, and this kind of shows a view of the first room of the gallery. So the gallery space was quite extensive, and there were many rooms and also different levels. And I think we were about the only people there at the time. So this is a very large, complex abstract. It actually looks to me like paintings stacked against a wall in a studio. And note the yellow reference to Islamic motif in the lower right. Now these two, with dogs or wolves, they almost reminded me of a painting that would have been done about the American Southwest. So ignore the blue and white reflections on this one because they're just reflections on the glass. I'm not sure what the media was, but it seemed like a waxy coated textile. The layered white reminds me of mummies. The two eyes, with perhaps a mask below and a half moon above them, seems like an Islamic reference. And then there's the four pyramids or triangles across the bottom. But I really like this piece, and the texture and also the monochromatic aspect. So I like the graphic nature of this multi-panel piece. But have no idea about the meaning. There's some reference to fish and also the human form. So this is a complex piece. Unfortunately, there's a reflection in the upper left. There's lots of birds, a nature reference, and I love the colors on the back, the black background. So these were some large, kind of lopsided pottery pieces, and they're embossed and have painted patterns on them. And these two pieces, they were very nicely rendered, just fun images of people and cats. And this abstract, I felt like it was maybe evoking a dark storm, or else maybe like a tree or a bush. But anyway, it was a nice, interesting abstract work. So this one, also abstract, I really like the colors and the tension between the structure and the unstructured cloudiness. And in a structural way, it kind of evokes a skyline or maybe a ship. So here's another metal sculpture, again down in that first gallery. So this piece, obviously referencing gender, also maybe fashion, birds and flowers. And it was kind of a neat piece. I like the colors. And off in its own little niche was this kind of wacky piece, adding to the variety of the show. So I really love this. It's beautifully rendered painting. The white is kind of a thicker media, and there's the Aramaic uh, text across the top, and the beautiful, expressive, dancing female figures. So the sculpture on the left, definitely referencing ancient Egypt, and this is one of the gallery views. So this is a colorful abstract triptych. Perhaps it's of figures. The two end pieces seem to have a set of black eyes, and if you follow down from that, you can almost see that there's a seated figure there. And the centerpiece also seems to have a seated figure. So this is a whimsical piece. Seems like an urban scene with nature, but maybe it's actually not so whimsical because the two humans don't look very happy. And I found this really interesting. It's kind of a spooky piece. It's with embossed thick media, and it seems a little like, I don't know, maybe a haunted house or something. Feeling to it for me, anyway. And this was a diptych. It's abstract, evoking Aramaic text as it's used in Islam. In general, in Islamic art, there are no renderings of humans or even animals. It's all geometric and text. So here's next to a couple views of a sculpture. Again, it's a reference to ancient Egypt with a modern day take on a pharaoh. And these are four very interesting paintings or mixed media. They may be partially collage, and they have reference to ancient Egypt. I love the red, gold, and white palette, and there's lots of symbols. And another whimsical scene, this one very colorful. It looks like maybe rural Egypt, has animals, palms, adobe type structures. And more pottery. This is very similar to ancient storage jars or amphora, but there's a patchwork of ancient art scenes on them, and these are actually mainly from Greece, as far as I know. They're not Egyptian. So totally different piece here. This one evokes late 19th to 20th century Parisian art. For me, it's maybe like Toulouse-Lautrec, early Picasso. And this is a sky view of families at a beach, or maybe it's a market on the shore with baskets of fish, and there's umbrellas, like sun umbrellas. And this is a multimedia triptych on cloth with definite Egyptian art references. They're pharaonic, the pharaohs. So, and they're basically wall hangings. And this is a man and a woman. It's a set of paintings. And this is a metal sculpture that kind of blends a man and woman. And I think they're probably by the same artist. And again, blending a couple into one. This is a kissing couple, and this is a metal sculpture. So this is an interesting piece. Next two pieces, they both have some marine references, and this one definitely has ancient art reference, and not necessarily Egyptian. So this, I think, the same artist, and you can see the marine imagery here, and also ancient or an indigenous imagery. And I think it's inspired actually by Australian Aboriginal art. You can see the kangaroo there on the left. So this one, it really features sinuous nudes, and not a lot comes to mind. I mean, maybe Adam and Eve. There's a sky above with some imagery some humans. And then there's a structure with a doorway that you can look through, and it's flanked by animals. And this is an abstract portrait. Again, sorry about the reflection, but it's a nice, interesting piece. So these are portraits, and they evoked for me portraits that are painted on mummies, or were painted on mummies during Roman times in Egypt. I like the monochromatic palette and the use of gold. And this is a close-up of one of the paintings. So again, quite different here. This is again beautifully rendered, and it's kind of a surreal image, and there's your harlequin in the background. And this one was multimedia. Maybe it's just a collage, and definitely has a generally African feeling. And note the little green giraffe in the left. So this was an interesting surreal image, abstract with a bull as seated figure, and note the balloon on the right. And another abstract with a figure, possibly some structures, and in back maybe a submarine, maybe a reference to a whale. I don't know. But it's fun to look at. And this was a complex piece, and definitely some sort of comment on the complexity of being female, or the condition of being female. At least that's what I get from it. And this is a very nice abstract pattern. Has plant and feather-like items. The rectangles evoke a landscape with structures or maybe fields. And this is kind of a straightforward portrait of a rural family. It may be a couple with 3 daughters, but still the setting's a little odd. They're out in, like they're standing behind a bunch of bushes. So it's an interesting piece. And here's another couple. Very cool colors and thick media, etched with symbols. And here's a really surreal work. It's an invisible female wearing clothes and a fanciful hat. And another surreal work. This one reminds me, of course, of Salvador Dali. It's clearly not a happy scene. The palette is mainly gray and red, and it shows 2 incapacitated water faucets or hydrant structures. But the earth is parched and cracked, and the surreal tower-like structures on the left appear bound with ropes. I can't tell what she's holding in her hand, but it's red, amorphous, sort of stringy. But it's beautifully painted, and again, just fun to look at. So these next 2 are a wooden sculpture of a woman, and I have to, love the simplicity of it. And this one, it's an almost monochromatic rendering of African women and children, but their hair, toes, eyes, and hands are all part of kind of a pattern. And the overall feeling, for me, it's warm and calm. And this was 4 abstract paintings hung together as a unit. And looking closely, you can see some modern imagery in there, but also some ancient Egyptian imagery, especially the lotuses in the lower center, if you can see that. And this is another 4 paintings hung as a unit, again abstract. And I really love these. They're a beautiful ceramic sculpture and a wall hanging, and they look great together. And two more pieces that I would call whimsical with a woman and children. In both images, they're in motion, moving in a vehicle or a boat, but the palette is very subdued. It gives a sort of calm feeling, but also maybe just a little bit sinister. So this was an installation, life size. It appears to represent the production of life-size cutouts. Some are positioned on the ground, some are standing, but they're all unique. They're all painted differently. And these last two pieces were just interesting works on paper by the same artist. They have a lot of texture, and I just love looking at them. They look kind of like a marine animal or something like that, possibly. So the second part of this talk is about the arts and crafts of both Egypt and Jordan. But first I want to start with a little architecture. This is the Muhammad Ali Mosque in Cairo, and it was built about 1830. And it has an enormous dome, about 70 feet in diameter, 170 feet high. It's really a gorgeous space. It is a museum, but people also come here to pray, as in this photo. They were kind of off to the side, away from the crowd. So handmade carpets are an important craft in Egypt and also in many Mideastern countries, other Mideastern countries. In this particular shop, which is located in a rural area near Cairo, it is legal to have children as apprentices, and they're working as shown here. So they work to a design which they post on the loom, and work by hand, weaving various colored yarns, which are stored above the loom, as shown here. And so these next two are views of the showroom. Most of the rugs are made of wool, but some of the most expensive ones are actually made of silk, and they're really gorgeous and very, very, very intricate, and they're very interesting to touch. They're luxurious items. So another craft in Egypt uses traditional papyrus for painting scenes of ancient Egypt, as shown here. But they also have paintings on papyrus of more contemporary scenes. So those are also available. So while on the Nile River cruise, we went on an excursion to a Nubian village. And this is how the boat was decorated. Note the American flag on the ceiling. So the harbor at the village was very colorful with artworks and murals. There's a couple photos. So we also visited this rather large and colorful home of an extended family. This is the large communal area in the dwelling that was set up for selling their crafts to their visitors. And then here's just a few other views of the dwelling and the artwork on the walls. And this is actually looking down into that communal space. And I love the paintings around the doors. So this room, they displayed their woven handicrafts. And I think these were things that were for their own use. And this is another room in the building, apparently for gathering and dining. Okay, so this is the last of the photos taken in Egypt, and the rest are going to be when we were in Jordan. So this map shows Jordan in green. Following our Egyptian tour, we flew from Cairo to Amman in Jordan, and then we we spent the night at a resort on the Dead Sea, which is also indicated on this map. The Dead Sea is located on the border between Israel and Jordan, and the resort was just across from Jerusalem, across, from on the Dead Sea. So the lobby at the resort held a bit of an art collection. A couple of the display cabinets are shown here. And these are a few of the special items in the cabinet. And the pottery was especially nice. So an important craft item in Jordan is wood furniture, intricately inlaid with mother of pearl, like this chest of drawers. And this is another example. This one has some additional collectibles on the top. And another, the mirror above the table is actually reflecting a contemporary painting hanging on the opposite wall. And this arrangement shows several collectible items, including a silk rug and handmade round mosaic between the two windows. And one more very large mother of pearl in display cabinet. And this is a view of the intricate ceiling and light fixture in the lobby lounge. So from there, we visited Mount Nebo. It's the place where, according to the Bible, Moses looked across the Jordan River and the Dead Sea and saw the promised land of Israel before he died. And this was a sculpture that was created to commemorate a visit by Pope John Paul II. So here's the current basilica. The original 4th century church and its mosaics were excavated beginning in the 1930s, and the present structure was built over it to be used as a church, but also to display ancient mosaics that were there. So this is looking at the back side of the church. And this is the front, it was very plain, but it looks out over a panoramic view. So facing the front of the basilica is this, it's called a brazen serpent monument or serpentine cross. And it's by Gian Paolo Fantoni. It recalls the bronze serpent on a pole which God told Moses to erect to protect his people from the poisonous snakes that he had sent as a punishment. Just looking at the bronze serpent erected by the prophet was supposed to heal and save them. So this particular sculpture merges the healing bronze serpent of Moses with the cross of Christ the Savior. So this is a view inside the basilica. And this is my photo of one of the most lovely mosaics. And here's a better view, or a better image of it. So these next several slides, they're views of the great variety of beautifully preserved mosaics that are in that structure. So we're just going to go through them. So moving from the ancient mosaics to a present-day mosaic workshop that employs local people, and some of them have disabilities. So these are some scenes in the workshop. And throughout the adjacent store. I think this was my favorite one. And they also produced extremely tiny, intricate mosaics, and they mount them as jewelry. And they using these very tiny shards, as shown here. So these are a couple more views in the store, and these are showing furniture, again, inlaid with mother of pearl, and a few more handcrafted mosaics. So we visited the lovely Greek Orthodox Church of St. George in the town of Madaba. It houses a special 6th century mosaic map, which is the oldest cartographic depiction of the Holy Land. And this is a better view of the ceiling and the chandeliers. And this is what remains of this map. So now I'm gonna digress with just a little bit of travelogue, because we're in Jordan and there's some very interesting things. So I'm going to start with a few photos of ancient Petra. So after walking for over a mile through a slot canyon, such as shown on the left, you arrive at the iconic treasury, which is on the right. So built in the 1st century, is thought to have been a mausoleum. So here's a full view. Petra was a regional trading hub from about 200 BC until a major earthquake in 363 AD, after which it steadily declined. The inhabitants were called the Nabateans. And of course, there's a lot of artwork just in the indigenous costumes and textiles, and the camels have beautiful textiles. And also, there's a lot of tombs there, and these are rock cut tombs, and you can see the decorative carvings. And this is a Bedouin man in a native dress. He had a shop set up in one of these cave-like dwellings with spices and incense, which is what would have been the main things traded through the area in the antiquity. So finally, here's a few slides of Jerash, and it's one of the best preserved Roman cities outside of Italy. This is the North Gate. It's a very expansive site. And this is the theater, part of the theater. It's an oval plaza, and you see the modern city of Jerash in the background. It's the Temple of Zeus. Pillar-lined road. And finally, just a few artworks that are at our final hotel, which is the Fairmont in Amman. And these are all probably by the same artist. And again, they have the Islamic reference in the motif. And ending with the sunset in Amman. So thanks very much for listening.